Exhibit B.
Paragraph or page?
I think it is paragraph. Let me just get the paragraph number. In paragraph 4, you mentioned that among the concerns that you had at GDOH's plan was timeframes and the project plan to place MHCUs in NGOs. Do you recall saying that in the affidavit?
That is correct, yes.
Why specifically were you so concerned about the timeframes?
So when the announcement was made public in October, the announcement was that all these patients were going to be moved by the March 2016. However, at the time of getting the project plan at the end of October, there was already patients being discharged. However, there wasn't a list of NGOs that they were going to. Those had not been identified or approved. Patients were being discharged before being assessed, as well as the facilities that they had chosen. Many of them were condemned buildings and they were not functional, and they would take a lot of work to be renovated. And those renovations, or even just identifying those facilities, had not yet happened. So we were very concerned that in such a short space of time, there was so much that had to be done, and that it seemed very rushed, and that it wasn't going to be in the best interest of the patients.
When you say it would not be in the best interest of the patients, does the nature of these patients play any role in it?
Absolutely. These are very vulnerable patients with severe mental illness. You know, they don't adjust well to change. A lot of these patients have been in Life Esidimeni hospitals for many, many years. So that's their home. And now having to get them used to, getting them assessed, getting them prepared to move to a new facility is a huge undertaking. As well as during that time, there was no communication to the families. They were not made aware as to what the plan was. They had heard it from the press. So their anxiety was very high. And these were the various concerns that we brought up, especially to this group of patients who had had a long journey with receiving treatment and being pushed from pillar to post. So a lot of these patients were stable. They had been doing well. So the idea of moving them was very concerning and was very sensitive.
Ms. Chambers, does the Mental Health Act and the regulations promulgated in terms of it prescribe a formula, if I may call it that, which must be followed when patients are considered for discharge?
Absolutely, and this would normally have to be assessed by a clinical team, and that's why there's a multidisciplinary team that would have to be ensured that the best interest of the patient and their reintegration, whether it be moved to a step-down facility or any other facility, is considered.
And does a discharge of this nature, is it something that gets done in one move, or is it a graduated process? Is new surroundings? Can you perhaps explain that?
Absolutely. So it is very important. There's various steps that have to be taken into account. Everything from social grants to their treatment plan. You know, the facilities that they were being proposed to move to didn't have the kinds of multidisciplinary teams that were available at Life Esidimeni Hospital. Many of the NGOs don't have full-time psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, physios or OTs, which a lot of these patients were expecting. So there's a whole process that has to happen over a long period of time, an adequate period of time that could help support the patient with these moves. That also included the family members, so that they were part of this, so that we could ensure that there were no disruptions and that there was an easy process going forward.
Now, you are aware, as also appears from your affidavit and your evidence, that once the service level agreement between the GDOH and Life Esidimeni had been terminated, the pressure, if I may put it in those terms, was placed on Life Esidimeni by the department to effect transfer of these patients. You're aware of that?
I'm aware I was in many meetings with the various stakeholders where all of these issues were discussed. Yes.
Were the concerns, or let me rephrase that, you mentioned that various persons raised concerns. Were these concerns about the abbreviated manner in which the patients were to be transferred, was that raised?
Yes, they were in all the meetings that we had, where it was the Gauteng Department of Health, SADAG, as well as Life Esidimeni reps. These were also minuted in the meetings as well and submitted to the department.
If I understand correctly, the department's own clinicians expressed concerns about the manner in which the plan was to be implemented.
That is correct. They had, especially from from SASOP, the South African Society of Psychiatrists, as well as from the Gauteng Regional Group, they had submitted letters already from June 2015 around their concerns.
And if I understand, they were, when I refer to they, I refer to the clinicians in the employ of the department. And if you could perhaps clarify that, the impression I gained from your evidence is that they were informed by Dr. Silvano and Dr. Manamela that they were not to criticize the department.
Yes, on a number of occasions in the meetings I attended, on 2 occasions specifically, both the board, who are clinicians at SADAG, were threatened by Dr. Manamela with a conflict of interest to state that they were government employees and they weren't allowed to go against the government. And in a meeting in January 2016, there was a discussion between Dr. Barney Silobano and Dr. Talatala from SASOP on the same issues.
Right. Now, you mentioned in your evidence that one of the concerns that was raised by NGOs, I don't know how many of them there were that they did not know the names of patients because they did not have medical records. Do you recall having said that?
That is correct, yes.
That will be given by witnesses from Life Esidimeni, and it is confirmed by what is contained in affidavits by some of the department employees who were placed at the various Life Esidimeni facilities, is that on discharge, let me rephrase that, prior to discharge, patients who had been identified for discharge were assessed by a multidisciplinary team with the intention to identify and match patients to suitable NGOs. Are you aware of that process that took place?
I'm aware that that process was underway, yes.
There will also be evidence that on some days, the instruction would be received that, for example, 10 patients were to be prepared for a specific NGO, and that in due course transport that would accommodate 27 patients would arrive, and then another 17 patients would have to be prepared in haste. You're aware of that as well?
Yes, that is correct.
The evidence was that despite all those challenges, each and every patient who was discharged bearing a sticker attached to their clothing, the patient's name, identity number, and a photograph of the patient. In addition, there would be a discharge summary. Also, what is referred to as a periodical report. Perhaps you can explain to the court what a periodical report is.
I just have to add, sorry, I was not aware that patients were transferred with stickers or identity cards. Many of the reports that we have, and even photos of patients being bussed at a very, very quick rate, they didn't have stickers or identification. Some were still in their pajamas from the morning. So no, I'm not aware of that kind of information that it's sent. There were some patients that were sent with their medical records and a packet of their medication for a week or two, but no, I'm not aware of any stickers with their names or identifications.
That will be the evidence. The periodical report, can you explain to the court what that is?
I think that would probably be best explained by the doctors that were preparing those documents. Unfortunately, I'm not a psychiatrist or a treating document.
It's MHCA 13, my lady, for the convenience of the court and the other parties. This can be found in the regulations promulgated under the Mental Health Care Act. It's form MHCA 13. And Ms. Chambers, if I'm putting the incorrect, or if I'm putting something to you that you don't know or can't comment on, then please just say so. But this provides for the surname of the user, the first name of the user, the date of birth or estimated age, the gender, the description in a certain category, whether it's assisted user, involuntary patient, inpatient, or an involuntary outpatient, etc. The name of the health establishment concerned, the registration number, the date of first admission of mental health care user, the mental health status, which is as a short statement of the mental health status before and since admission, since the last report, the present condition with special reference to any symptom indicating homicidal, suicidal, or dangerous tendencies, both prior to and since admission, is completed, the present mental status, the present psychopharmaceutical treatment, the condition, the diagnosis at the present date, family contacts, assisted mental health care user in terms of Section 30, whether the user can express him or herself. In other words, Ms. Chambers, a very detailed, albeit abbreviated, history of the patient's both psychiatric and medical condition and the treatment. Are you conversant with this document?
I am.
And it will be that patients were discharged with those forms. Can you comment on that?
Unfortunately, in my experience and the reports we received, not all patients were sent to NGOs with that documents or those IDs. We also had NGOs that had reported receiving patients without that information.
Right. We'll be aware that some of the patients appear to have been moved from one receiving facility to another receiving facility without it having been pre-planned.
That is correct. And in some cases, even moved to a second and a third NGO.
And we wouldn't between with any documentation or other items that were provided to such a patient.
That's correct.
If the ladyship will bear with me for a moment. Yes, the evidence will also be that the patients who were discharged to a hospital, such as Sterkfontein or Weskoppies, would have been provided with a 7-day supply of medication, whereas patients who were to be discharged to NGOs received a 28-day supply of medication. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Thank you, my lady. I have no further questions.
Just bear with me. Yes, can we continue with the cross-examination of the witness? Anyone who's ready now? to put questions to the witness? Oh, Miss Foster.
Hi, Ms. Davis. See if I can move in a bit.
On behalf of the 4 deceased members, ne?
That's indeed correct, my lady. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Davis, firstly, my name is Advocate Foster and I'm appearing on behalf of 4 of the deceased members. 3 of them died at the Esidimeni.
Come again. 3 at?
The Esidimeni unit and 1 of them at the CCRC NGO. I just want to know that you say that you are the operations manager at SADC. What does that entail?
So as part of my, thank you very much, Advocate. As my role as Operations Director, I oversee the overall running of the organization. We work on various different projects, especially as my role is one on advocacy, as well as working with the press and media and our training workshops and oversight for patient care.
If I am correct, that you also oversaw the letters that were drafted, sent to the department, and you were also present at all the meetings, as you are also aware of all the minutes of the meetings, and you were also aware of all the correspondence that was drafted regarding this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you have personal knowledge of all the correspondence, all the email correspondence, the minutes of the meeting. You personally have knowledge thereof. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Do you confirm the contents of those documents that was handed in? The correctness thereof?
Yes, I do.
And you do not have any objection if those documents form part of this proceedings?
No, no objections.
Can you please tell me, have anybody consulted with you prior to your testimony today?
I've worked with Section 27 who are also representing SADC. That's correct, yes.
So there was no consultations between yourself and the evidence leader, the NPA, is that correct? The National Prosecuting Authority, they hadn't consulted with you?
We did when we first did the affidavit, but not since. And obviously to be subpoenaed to come and testify today.
You also testified that you've been with SADC, okay, but this now in 2019, you were there with them for 10 years. Am I correct? Oh, for 12 years, I apologize. So it's now almost 15 years, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Can you please tell me, had you had any previous encounters with the Department of Health prior in these 15 years? How many interactions would you have had with the department?
We've had various interactions, whether it be at conferences or at stakeholder engagement meetings, but never to this degree or to this level. But due to the nature of what we do and the kind of work that we do in the mental health space, we would have interactions with the department.
And how would you describe the relationship prior to these incidents that occurred from 2015? How was the relationship between SADC and the department?
They were very mutually beneficial. We would work in the same spaces. We would be presenting at different conferences together. There were no conflict or any issues before.
So can I say that there was a good working relationship between the two parties, both parties corresponded with each other and there was no problems between them? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
When you realized in 2015, when you became aware of this media report, what was the reason that the department wanted to move these patients from life Esidimeni? We all know now that, yeah, please continue.
Sorry, Advocate. According to the media release, it was due to terminating the service level agreement due to budgetary constraints.
Was there any explanation provided to you what will change in the service level agreement if they just had to move patients from Life Esidimeni to other NGOs, what would have been the implication in regarding the service level agreement that will make it easier for the department? Was that provided to you?
The only information that we had was that they were terminating the contract with Life Hospital Group for Life Esidimeni and moving patients to NGOs because it would be more cost effective than having them into the treatment facility. So in long term, it was going to save them more money.
But the NGOs, would they have been provided with subsidies, or how would the payment to the NGOs work to care for these mental health care users?
Yes, they would be receiving a subsidy for these patients. That's correct.
When you spoke regarding the release of the media, after the media report was released, who was your first contact person that you spoke to, that you raised any concerns with?
We tried to reach out directly to the Mental Health Directorate for the Gauteng Department of Health, to Dr. Manamela and her team. We had previous engagements and we had her contact details from the intersectoral meetings. So we have tried to engage with them first. But
there was no response. They did not she did not want to communicate with you, am I correct?
Well, we just didn't receive a reply to our communications, that's correct.
So it was only after 702 approached Dr. Manamela that there was any reaction from the side of the Department of Health. Is that correct?
It was with Ms. Kadani Mkhlangu that John Robbie from 702 had done an interview. And during that live radio feed, when he had asked her if she was engaging with us and we had said that she wasn't, did she then commit to live radio that she would then meet with us and make a plan to engage?
Did you listen to this feed yourself, the radio interview?
Yes, I was live on the radio interview as well, as families were calling into this radio station to report their concerns around just hearing the announcement of the closure and that they had not heard about it before and they were really concerned about their loved ones. And we were doing, as part of our patient advocacy profile, was to give comment. And we had a very long working relationship with 702 and John Robbie, and he called us to give comments. And we had shared that we had tried to reach out, but that we were not successful in securing a meeting.
The reason provided by the MEC at that stage over this radio interview, what did she say? Why was the move? Did she console the families? Did she say where the instruction came from? Was there even any information provided by her at that stage during the radio interview?
No, all the information was just per the media release that she had sent out earlier, that they were terminating the service level agreement with Life Esidimeni Group based because of budget.
Was the name of Mr. Makura ever mentioned during this interview?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
During this whole process from 2015 up until 2019, was the name of Mr. David Makura ever mentioned, Mr. David Makura?
No, he wasn't. He was never consulted or engaged in our meetings that we had with the Gauteng Department of Health. We did present some of the documents to notify the Gauteng Premier during the process, but we had never had any further engagements or meetings with them, no.
During these meetings that you had, who was always in attendance of this meeting that you could say was aware of what was going on every single time that the meetings were concurred?
Majority of the meetings, all the meetings were with Dr. Manamela. At some of the meetings, we also had Dr. Barney Silabano and then the former MEC, Ms. Kadani Mkhlangu. But all of the minutes from the meetings, if someone was not able to attend, were circulated with everyone that we were engaging with as well, including all those people. So they were always communicated and aware about our concerns that we were raising, or the issues, or even just the updates of our engagement and consultation with the department.
So the minutes of the meeting will be a true reflection of whatever happened into the meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Have you ever been to any of these NGOs that was referred, the patients were referred to? Have you ever personally gone to any of Takalani or Siabadinga or any of those NGOs? Did you personally visit them?
Not myself. I was never allowed to go to those NGOs. They were never allowed to have us on the premises. We had also then got our partners, the South African Federation for Mental Health at one stage, who were working with mental health NGOs and residential facilities, and they had been to some of the homes.
What was the reason provided? Why were you not allowed to go there? Why was all the communication stopped and you were not allowed to, or they were not allowed to provide you with any information, SADC specifically? Was there any reason provided?
We never received information. I think from the NGOs, they were just not allowed to talk to us or give us any information or share who was there or what was happening. We were apparently asking too many questions.
And who gave you the reason that you were apparently asking too many questions? Where did the instruction came from?
It was from the various NGOs when we were engaging with them. They had received that direct order from Dr. Manamela.
You also testified previously that you were present when asked by Mr. Van Bergen, Advocate Van Bergen. He asked you about the reports and the stickers that the patient had, and you said you were present and they were only in their pajamas. Did you see some of these patients that were transferred? Do you have personal knowledge thereof?
So we never got information or notification the dates that patients were being moved. It would so happen that a family member would be visiting, and that's how we would hear news that patients were being moved. So we never had a date of discharge or a planned timeline of when patients were moving. So we were never prepared. We were also never allowed to be at the premises. But from the families that were there in particular, they would be taking photos of patients who were being put onto buses or vehicles to be transported. And in all our communication with the families, as well as with the NGOs, when patients did arrive, we were never aware that they had, IDs or stickers with their names on. That was something that we never got to observe and see ourselves.
Did you observe the photos that was taken by the family members?
Yes, I did. And we received the notifications from the NGOs who had reported that some of the patients had not arrived with their documentation. And
when you observed those photos, what did you see? What did you observe from the photos?
Very, very scared patients. Some that were clutching onto bags or packets. It's just patients waiting to be put onto different transport vehicles, from small buses to taxis, various forms of transport.
Did you observe any stickers on the photographs that were shown to you?
No, I did not.
And the clothes that the patients were wearing, what did you observe from the photos of the clothes that they were wearing?
From the photos and from the reports, again, from the families as well as to the NGOs, some had been rushed. They were still in their pajamas. Some people were still in their slippers. So it did seem rushed. The patients didn't know. Often the facilities themselves were not aware that patients were being moved on that specific day. And they couldn't often give us information because they didn't have the plan as to where patients were going. When family members would ask the bus driver, "Where are you going? Can I follow you?" They didn't know the name of the place that they were going to. They were just told that they have to go to an address. And some of the families would then get into their cars and follow those vehicles to see where their loved ones were going.
If I also understand your evidence correctly, if it was not for one of the personnel of an NGO that provided you with a list, you were not even in a position to provide family members with a direction to where their loved ones were sent. Is that correct?
That is correct. We never received a list as to where patients were being moved to. That list from that one facility was actually shared with one of the Life Esidimeni Family Committee, so that if any of the loved ones from that facility could contact her directly to find out where their loved ones would go to. However, the information on that table or that list wasn't a true reflection as to where the patients ended up. Yeah. The patient's name would be under a certain NGO, but that patient would never be at that NGO. They would be moved to a different NGO or arrive somewhere else. So that also wasn't a true reflection as to where patients were being moved to.
Yeah. How was your relationship with Life Esidimeni prior to this incident? What would you say was the circumstances in Life Esidimeni specifically? How was that?
So we never had any engagements with Life Esidimeni Hospital Group, as we weren't able to refer any of our callers directly to Life Hospital Group. The only patients that were referred to those facilities were from psychiatrists or staff at tertiary institutions like Sterkfontein or Westkoppies or Taro, who would then assess the patient and then refer them to Life Esidimeni Group. So we never had them in our referral guide. We did not have the referral powers to refer patients to them. So while we knew that they existed, but we had no interaction before this, no.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, only patients referred to Life Esidimeni by medical doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. That's the only people that was transferred or referred to specifically to be housed at Life Esidimeni. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it would be from state officials from a state hospital that would do that referral process, yes.
Just give me 1 minute. The stickers or the forms that were referred to you by Advocate van Bergen, whose responsibility is it? I understand that Life Esidimeni completes the form and then it's supposed to travel with the patient to whoever the patient is supposed to go to the NGO. Is that correct?
I would assume so, yes.
So at the end of the day, whose responsibility is it to ensure that all the patients that's transferred, if you have any knowledge, please say if you do not. But if a patient is, for instance, transferred from one NGO to another NGO, we're supposed to secure that all those patients' medication and forms is attached to that patient to be transferred to the next one. Would you say is a responsibility?
I would assume that the responsibility would be from the one treating team of the facility to the next treating team at the facility. So a hospital manager or treating should be receiving all those documentations and those notifications.
Okay. Am I correct to say that the Department of Health would have been the curator of these patients or the guardian of these patients? Would that be a right way to assume if they are placed there by the department at a specific NGO?
Yes, these patients are under the care of the Gauteng Department of Health, yes, in these different facilities. They're at the care of the state.
Okay. So ultimately, the guardian of these patients would remain the Department of Health. And they are supposed to keep track of wherever these patients are going. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Do you have any personal knowledge about the subsidies paid to these specific patients? Is a subsidy connected to one patient, or does the NGO receive a subsidy of a global amount to look after these patients? Do you have any knowledge thereof?
I have some knowledge. So this was also in place before the transfer or the service level agreement had terminated. It was an ongoing relationship with the Gauteng Department of Health or any provincial Department of Health with the NGOs in their province, that any of the state patients that were in their care would get a subsidy per patient by the department. So, for example, these NGOs that were receiving additional patients or Life Esidimeni patients would receive the subsidy that was a standard rate to take care of these patients on a monthly basis.
So if one patient is moved from one NGO to the other NGO, obviously the subsidy will follow and go to the other NGO. So the Department of Health is supposed to be aware of where these patients are in order to make sure that the necessary subsidies are paid. Is that correct?
That is correct, as well as these patients would also be getting a social grant, which would be contributing to the costs at the NGO for their upkeep and treatment. So there's number of different departments. You would have to know where patients are going to finalize which account this money is going to take care of these patients.
Ms. James, did you testify during the arbitration award? testify?
I did not testify, but I did provide evidence and information to the arbitration, yes.
So you only provided a sworn statement, if I understand correctly, for the arbitration hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And attached to that statement was the minutes of the meeting and the correspondence and everything referred to in your statement. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
What was your dealings with Ms. Jacques Guerbes?
As far as I understand, Mrs. Guerbes's portfolio was looking after the NGOs and the facilities. She would often be at several of the meetings that we had with the Gauteng Department of Health. And I know that she had dealings directly with the NGOs as well with regards to licensing.
Okay. Was there any instructions that you are aware of personally given by Ms. Jacques Guerbes?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Can you please tell the court, I understand that the second civil matter in this, was it January 2016, when you went to court for the second time with the urgent application?
That was in March 2016, yes.
I apologize, that's correct. March 2016, the second application. Why was the matter found not in your favor?
Come again? What is the question?
My question is, in March 2016, with the second urgent application, you testified that the matter was unsuccessful due to some technicality that the judge found in the judgment. Can you please explain that to me?
Yes. From the information that we received through the final report, the reason that we were unsuccessful in stopping the discharge of the 55 patients was the technicality around discharge and placement, and the fact that the department had assured the court that they were acting in the best interest of the patient and that they had made the necessary plans at a children's facility to accommodate the adults. The technicality around the word discharge and transfer, what was being disputed as well.
Can you please tell the court what is the difference? What is a discharge and what is a placement? What is the difference between the two?
A placement would be moving from one facility to another facility, putting them under a care of another NGO. A discharge, in the normal sense of it, means that you're saying that the patient is okay to be discharged and no longer needs to be in a facility or a home and can go back to their community or to their homes. So discharge means that they no longer need our care and they can continue, whereas a placement is that they're moving to another facility or they're being placed in the care of a specific NGO or facility.
And if I understand your evidence correctly, discharge, there will be a specific procedure for a discharge. It's not an overnight decision. There's some formal administration processes that must continue before the patient can be discharged. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. And especially with the nature of the illness that these patients are dealing with, it's a multidisciplinary team. They would have to assess and sign off and do the necessary paperwork. Yes.
The reports that you received regarding the medication, what report or personal knowledge do you have regarding the medication if it did accompany the patients that was placed at other NGOs or at the NGOs from Life Esidimeni?
So I'm not a doctor to give exact information on issues of medication, but what I can say is that normally with patients with a chronic illness is that if they're not given their medication, they are at a higher rate to relapse as well as seizures, and this could have a detrimental effect to their health and well-being. So not having enough medication, even skipping a day's medication, could have a profound impact on patients with regards to their treatment and compliance. And this was our concern, is that some of the patients didn't have enough medication, and this is why we were seeing the reports that patients were not doing well and relapsing.
Okay. These reports that you have received, from whom did you receive these reports?
These were from family members who had visited their loved ones, and that could document on the nature of well-being and health of their loved ones, as well as to see that they had perhaps regressed or were not doing well from a mental health perspective.
Okay. As the court pleases, my lady, may I please just have 1 minute to consult with my attorney?
Yes.
Just 1 minute. Thank you, Ms. Francis. I'll be with you.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Can you please tell the court, do you have any personal knowledge of how these specific NGOs were identified, or who identified them?
So there normally is a guideline and a criteria for NGOs to be able to provide care to, whether it be children, whether it be people with intellectual disability, or even mental illness. And there is a criteria and a guideline that has to be followed. I'm not aware on the process of these NGOs. At the time when the announcement was first made in October 2015, SADAG were aware of NGOs that were working in the province and had reached out to them to find out if they had been earmarked to take patients, because we had already known that they did not have the skill set or the services available to look after the types of patients that were at Life Esidimeni, and they were not aware. So many of these NGOs that were eventually then used where patients were moved to were not NGOs that we were affair with, that we worked closely with, that weren't before this earmarked as mental health facilities. Yes.
So the NGOs were
Just before you proceed, if I understand you, the question was, do you have any knowledge how these NGOs were identified? Was it not your question, Ms. Fenton?
That's correct, my lady. That was my question.
Can you please answer this one? Do you have any knowledge as to how they were identified, these specific NGOs?
Thank you, milady. No, I do not know the specific criteria for these NGOs. We did offer assistance to the department to help them to come up with an assessment or a guideline, but I never saw the assessment or guideline or criteria for these NGOs that were appointed.
Okay.
Thank you, my lady. Now, after you have received information about the specific NGOs that were identified for these patients to be transferred to, did any of those NGOs raise any suspicion, if I can put it like that, or concerns by SADAG?
Sorry, could you just elaborate what kind of concerns?
Can you just rephrase the question?
I will do so, my lady. The NGO names that were provided to you at the end after being identified, was there any of these NGOs that you had previous dealings with or knowledge of that did raise concerns if they are suitable or not to accept these patients prior to them moving the patients to that specific NGO?
So many of the NGOs that patients were moved to, we did not have the list prior. The patients were then moved, and then we found out which NGOs were receiving patients. So we didn't have any prior interaction or engagement with those NGOs. We only received the concerns once patients had been moved and once NGOs were dealing with concerns around subsidy, money, shelter, and food. Yeah.
The specific NGO, one of them was found to be condemned not fit for human occupation, and then there was renovations that had to be done on some of the other NGOs. Do you have any personal knowledge of those factors or visits, or any personal knowledge about why it was condemned not fit for human occupation, or what the renovations was that needed to be done to these NGOs?
We never received the breakdown in that report and that information, despite asking for it in numerous letters and meetings. We are aware that some of the Life Esidimeni Family Committee were invited to some site visits at NGOs and had raised concerns at those NGOs, but we weren't aware of any specific report or dealings. At one point, there was a list of the hospitals or the places that the department were going to send patients, These were the Old Germiston Hospital, Old Tshwane Hospital, and they had been condemned and need a lot of renovations. And those were the concerns we also raised around how that was going to be done, what needed to be done for it to be fit to take on patients. And that's what we had also recorded in our meeting minutes as well as in our meetings.
I assume you also were aware of the renovation of the abandoned nursing home at Kalapong Hospital. Would that be included in your list? Were you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that. That was never given to us, unfortunately.
Do you know who the author was of this project plan?
From our engagements, this was a Gauteng Department of Health decision, and this had come from the MEC of Health, Ms. Kadani Mkhlangu, who had then directed it to her team. In our meetings, they had often explained their decision and explained what they were going to do and why they had come to this decision. So that's information that we were given.
Thank you very much, my lady. That will be all. Conclude my cross-examination. As it will be, thank you, Ms. Chambers. I appreciate your honesty.
Thank you very much. Who is next now?
My lady, might I be permitted to just clarify one aspect that arose from Ms. Foster's questions?
Yes, you may do that.
Thank you. Ms. Chambers, you were asked by Ms. Foster, and I'll paraphrase. She asked who was responsible for ensuring that the patient records, etc., was.
I think I'll have just a second. You are recording.
Yes, I do.
Just a second, Miss Marriott. Miss Chambers.
From one treating team to another.
Just a second, please.
Yes.
Mr. Berhan. Yes, I had a problem with your recording. I couldn't hear anything, and I see the witness is responding. If you can just repeat what you have just asked.
Thank you, my lady. I shall do so. Okay. My lady, the first point let me
just check your recording, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, the problem is the sound is too high. I don't know whether there's an echo or... Irene, can you chip in here?
If you can switch off yours. My lady, is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. My lady, the first point that I put to Ms. Chambers was that she was asked by Ms. Foster who was responsible for ensuring that patient records, etc., accompanied a patient. And Ms. Chambers' reply, which she confirmed, was that she assumed that the responsibility was from one treating team to another.
Yes.
The question that I'm going to put to her, the statement that I'm going to put to her, Ms. Chambers, are you aware that the actual transfer arrangements, transfer plans were solely in the hands of the GDOH, the Department of Health?
Yes, I am aware. They were the ones that also put the project plan together and the timeline. So yes, and they also knew where patients were going to which NGOs. That's correct.
Yes, and the process that was followed, and this will appear from the evidence of Dr. Mkhatshwa specifically, is that Life Esidimeni would be informed on a specific day that a certain number of patients of a specified category had to be prepared and gotten ready for transfer. They would not be told particulars of which NGO they were going to, and they would then, with the multidisciplinary team, endeavor to identify patients to fit the specifications provided by the Department of Health. Are you aware of that process?
Yes, that was also discussed in meetings as well. Yes.
Right. And that the ultimate decision of who was transferred, how many were transferred, where they were transferred to, and the actual final act of transfer was solely in the hands of the Department of Health.
That is correct. Many of our engagements, the staff and the team and the management of Life Esidimeni didn't even know which NGOs had been approved and didn't know where patients were going. So that is correct. They didn't have a list either of where patients were being moved to.
And that in reality, what would happen is that the patients would be transferred from the care of Life Esidimeni to the Department of Health officials who were placed at that facility, and those officials would then take all the necessary steps to ensure the transfer was effected.
That's correct. We also had reports from families that were there on the day that patients were being moved, that there were health officials on site.
Thank you, my lady. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we are left with who? Mr. Hutamo and Mr. Hutamo and I think. Are you ready, or the other counsel?
Thank you, Judge. There are no questions to the witness on behalf of...
From Mr. Hutamo. Yes, who's next? Any counsel who still wants to cross-examine the witness?
Lady,
Yes.
we don't have any questions for this witness. Thank you. What Pringle for Dr. Silabana.
Are we still left okay?
My lady, we also have no questions for the witness. Thank you very much.
You don't have questions?
Thank you, my lady. Thank you, Ms. Chambers.
This is on behalf of...
Ms. Mchlangu.
Yes. Thank you. Who did I left out? Who did I leave out? Back to the evidence leader. Do you have any re-examination? Mr. Late?
Just one aspect,
Yes.
my lady. Just for clarity's sake, the statement that was handed in terms of as Exhibit B before court, that statement was taken from you by the investigating team after your consultation with myself and my team on the 5th of September 2018. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions, my lady.
I think I wanted to ask you questions, but I think some of the counsels touched those questions. So thank you for your evidence. You are therefore excused as a witness. Thank you very much for your evidence. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you very much, my lady. Thank you.
Thank you. I see, Mr. Late, it's 20 to 4. I don't know whether you
Yes,
want
my
to...
lady, the other witness is here, but I think it's more prudent to lead his evidence completely. So my learned friend, Ms. Marriott, will lead his evidence, and I ask that the matter be remanded till tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock,
Yes.
to lead Dr. Mokachwa's evidence.
If I may, yes, and then from Dr. Mkacha we'll go to, once we finish with his evidence.
Ms. Marriott is going to lead his evidence.
Yes, once we finish with his evidence, who will be the next one?
Then after his evidence, it will be.
Are you?
She is A38.
A38. Okay.
The statement is just before Dr. Mokachwa's, and Mokachwa is A40.
Okay. I think we are all exhausted. We will start tomorrow morning, unless if there is any objection, but I take it that everybody, yes. This matter is therefore remanded until tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is the 20th, ne? 20th of July. We will start at 10 o'clock. I hope, let's try to see if we can join earlier so that at 10 o'clock we start with the proceedings, because if we can have problems, unless if maybe we have serious problems. Yes. All right. All of you are excused. Irene, are we going to use the same link? Irene, are you there? I think that's how I understood her.
But Miss Malady, our understanding is we are going to use the same
we're
link.
continuing with it throughout, ne? Okay, yes. So we can just hang up and then join again tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much. The matter is adjourned until tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you.